The building had been silent for 17 minutes. No cries, no taps, just the groan of shifting steel. The rescue commander had just called it a recovery, not a rescue. That's when the rookie paramedic stepped through the cordon tape. She looked at the collapse pattern, then at the command board, and said the one thing that froze every veteran firefighter on scene. I have a code for this. And if we don't use it in the next 6 minutes, the chief's son dies buried in that rubble. Her name was Jessica, a 24-year-old paramedic on her third shift. To the veteran rescue squad, she was just a kid to keep clear of the hot zone. But she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the rubble, calculating a collapse sequence she recognized from a manual she was never supposed to see. The chief's son was running out of air. The command structure had failed. And now the only person with a solution was the one person nobody was allowed to listen to. The collapse happened at 9:17 p.m. during a routine inspection of the old Adams Street textile mill, a 6-story brick skeleton scheduled for demolition next month. Fire Chief Robert Miller had brought his son, Liam, a newly minted engineer, to assess the site one last time for the Historical Society. They were on the 3rd floor when a support column, corroded from a hidden roof leak, gave way. The floor pancaked. Then the next. Then the next. By 9:25, the first engines were on scene. By 9:40, a full Type 1 urban search and rescue task force was mobilized. This was the city's elite, 68 personnel specializing in structural collapse, with teams for search, rescue, medical, hazardous materials, and technical engineering. The incident commander was Battalion Chief Marcus Thorne, a 30-year veteran with a reputation for running textbook-perfect operations. His command post was a model of order, sector maps, resource tracking, a dedicated planning section. But the building was a chaos of shattered brick and twisted I-beams. Initial sonar and canine searches identified one viable void deep in the pile, a single heat signature, a single heartbeat. 10:04, a firefighter probing the edge of the rubble found a hard hat. The nameplate read Miller. The radio traffic changed instantly. The rescue became personal. Every firefighter on that pile knew the chief's son was in there. The pressure on Thorne went from professional to primal. Standard protocol called for a slow, deliberate shoring operation, building a timber cage to safely tunnel through the unstable rubble. But with every minute, the medical team manager reported the dwindling odds. The golden hour was bleeding away. This was when Jessica Klein arrived with Ambulance 47. As a third-ride paramedic, her job was staging in the cold zone, ready to treat whoever came out. She was invisible to the command structure, but she saw everything. She saw the rescue squad focusing on a primary access point that, according to the collapse pattern she was sketching in her notebook, was a dead end. The weight distribution was wrong. The main compressive forces were channeling to the north face, not the west. Tunneling there would trigger a secondary collapse. She approached a lieutenant. He didn't look up from his clipboard. "Stage with your unit, medic." "Sir, the access point. The load path is shifting. If they breach there, the void will crush." The lieutenant finally looked at her. "Are you a structural engineer?" "No, sir." "Then get back to your bus." At 10:22, the first rescue squad made contact. They could hear faint tapping. They radioed the location. It was exactly where Jessica had predicted the void wouldn't be. The celebration was short-lived. As they began clearing debris to insert a camera, a deep groan echoed through the pile. A cascade of bricks and dust showered down. The sector officer screamed for everyone to pull back. The access point was gone, sealed under new fall. In the command post, Chief Thorne's face was stone. He had just lost his best route. His planning section scrambled for Plan B. The clock read 10:31. Liam Miller had been trapped for 74 minutes. Jessica watched from the periphery, her stomach tight. The manual she was thinking of wasn't from paramedic school. It was the Tactical Casualty Extraction Protocol, a classified field guide used for evacuating wounded personnel from collapsed structures in combat zones. She'd seen it once, 2 years prior, during a training exercise she was never officially part of. A forgotten booklet left on a bleacher by a visiting Army SF medic. She'd read it cover to cover, fascinated by its brutal, efficient diagrams for things like rapid void creation and load bypass. It was medicine without a hospital, rescue without permission. She tried again, this time with the medical team manager, a gruff veteran paramedic named Riggs. "The north face," she said, pointing at her crumpled sketch. "There's a conduit chase that ran through the original blueprints. It's a natural shear line. If we treat it like a Type 3 extraction corridor, we can bypass the main load." Riggs squinted at her. "A Type 3 what? Girl, what are you talking about? We follow the USAR Task Force Guide, not whatever you read on the internet." "It's not from the internet," Jessica said, her voice low. "It's from a TSEP manual, Tactical Casualty Extraction. The access code for a compromised structural void is Viper. You declare it to command to initiate bypass protocol." Riggs stared at her, then laughed, a short, sharp bark. "You're telling me there's a magic word. Get her out of my sector," he snapped to a nearby firefighter. Humiliated, Jessica retreated, but as she walked past the command board, she saw the updated timeline. The planning section had drafted a new shoring plan. It would take a minimum of 90 minutes to execute. Liam Miller did not have 90 minutes. His oxygen was gone. His body was cooling. He was now in the 000 zone, no sound, no movement, only a faint thermal trace. At 10:47, Chief Thorne made the call every commander dreads. He gathered the rescue squad officers. His voice, when it came over the command channel Jessica monitored on her radio, was hollow. "We are transitioning from rescue operations to recovery operations. Secure the perimeter. Prepare for the medical examiner." The words landed like a physical blow across the scene. Shoulders slumped. Tools went still. The chief had just declared his own son dead. That's when Jessica broke. She didn't go to a lieutenant or a manager. She walked straight through the cordon tape, past the stunned line firefighters, and into the halo of light surrounding the command post. Battalion Chief Thorne looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and furious at the intrusion. "Medic, you are in a hot zone. Get back." Jessica didn't move. She looked at the chief, then at the complex collapse diagram on his board. "The north face conduit chase," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence. "It's a pre-existing structural bypass. The access code is Viper. You have a Type 3 extraction scenario, and you are ignoring the only protocol that can reach him in time." Thorne stepped toward her, his presence towering. "Who are you?" "Paramedic Klein, sir." "You have no authority here." "I have the correct solution," Jessica said, holding his gaze. "Your shoring plan is for a textbook pancake collapse. This is a progressive floor failure with a lateral shift. The manual is wrong for this site. The TSEP is right. We have 6 minutes to initiate the bypass before his core temperature drops past the point of survivable trauma." The entire command post was frozen. Every seasoned officer stared at the blonde rookie, telling the battalion chief he was wrong, telling him his son could still live. Thorne's jaw clenched. "Arrest her." 2 firefighters moved toward her, but before they could reach her, Jessica did the one thing that could not be ignored. She turned to the rescue squad still standing by the rubble, raised her voice to a command pitch she didn't know she possessed, and shouted the sequence. "Viper protocol. Confirm north face shear line. All primary load is on west column assembly. Prepare for microbreach on my mark." For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, a senior rescue technician, a man who had served 2 tours as a combat engineer, snapped his head toward her. His eyes widened in pure, unadulterated recognition. He knew those words. He knew that sequence. He knew they were not in any civilian manual. He took 1 step forward, looked at his stunned crew, and then at Chief Thorne. "Sir," the technician said, his voice thick with shock. "She's right. That's a military extraction code. How does she know that?" The silence that followed was not just shock. It was the sound of an entire command structure cracking. Battalion Chief Thorne stared at his rescue technician, then back at Jessica. The technician's name was Carl Voss, two-tour in Afghanistan with the Army's 74th Engineer Company. He'd seen the TSEP manual exactly once, during a joint operation with a Special Forces medical unit. It was burned after the briefing. He was never supposed to speak of it again. "Explain," Thorne said, his voice a low blade. Voss swallowed. "Sir, Viper Protocol. It's for collapsed structures in active combat zones. It treats the rubble as a hostile entity. You don't shore it up. You trick it. You find the natural fault line the collapse created and you sneak a corridor through it. It's not in any civilian manual because it's too dangerous. It assumes you're willing to lose the rescuer to get the casualty out." All eyes turned to Jessica, the rookie paramedic who had just quoted a doctrine of last resort. "Who are you?" Thorne asked again, but the question had changed. "I told you," Jessica said, her focus already returning to the rubble pile. The clock was ticking. "I'm the one who can get your son out, but you have to give me the north face. Now." The chief was a man built on procedure. Every fiber of his training screamed to have her removed, to have her credentials ripped apart later. But his son's thermal trace was fading on the monitor. He looked at Voss. "Can it work?" Voss looked at Jessica's crude sketch, then at the collapse. He nodded once. "If the conduit chase is where she says it is, and if it held, it's the only shot. The shoring plan is dead, Chief." Thorne closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, he pointed at Jessica. "You have the north face, you have one squad. Voss, you're with her. If this goes wrong, the liability is mine. But if you get my son killed by being reckless..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Jessica didn't wait for permission. She moved. The designated rescue squad, a mix of seasoned firefighters and technical rescue specialists, looked at her with a blend of skepticism and desperate hope as she reached them. She didn't try to command them. She showed them. "The collapse created a diagonal shear," she said, using her hands to demonstrate in the air. "The main weight is here on the west columns, but when they failed, they shoved the north wall outward. There's a gap behind it, the old electrical and plumbing chase. It's a vertical pipe running floor to floor. If it didn't crush, it's a chimney straight down to the third-floor void." A firefighter shook his head. "We scanned the north face, it's solid." "You scanned for heat and movement," Jessica corrected. "Not for hollow structural channels. The brick is thick. The chase is narrow. Your equipment tuned it out. We don't go through the brick. We go through the mortar joint at the corner. It's the weakest point." She directed them to a specific seam in the crumbling brickwork. Using a chisel and a hand hammer, they began to carefully pick at the mortar. The sound was agonizingly slow and the tense quiet. After 90 seconds, the chisel punched through into open space. A faint, cool draft of trapped air whispered out. A collective breath was held. Voss inserted a flexible borescope camera. The monitor flickered to life, showing a narrow, dark shaft littered with broken conduit and dust. He guided the camera down, foot by foot. At approximately 18 feet down, the view opened up. The camera panned. There, in a small pocket created by a fallen desk and a filing cabinet, was Liam Miller. He was curled on his side, covered in white dust, one leg pinned under a concrete slab, but his chest was moving. Shallow, but moving. A ragged cheer started but was instantly hushed. They had visual confirmation. He was alive. But the problem was now horrifyingly clear. The void was unstable. The slab on his leg was key to holding up a larger piece of floor above it. Removing it could bring the whole pocket down. Standard protocol called for extensive shoring, exactly what they didn't have time for. Jessica studied the image. "We don't pull the slab," she said. "We fracture it." "With what?" a firefighter asked. "We can't use a jackhammer in there." "Not a jackhammer, a rescue strut." She pointed to a high-pressure airbag system. "We place the bag under the far edge of the slab. We inflate it just enough to create a hairline fracture along a stress fault. Then we use a hand-held hydraulic spreader to pop the fragment holding his leg. It's a TSEP maneuver called a pressure break. It isolates the load." Voss stared at her. That's a 1 in 1,000 shot. You need to know the exact stress point. I see it, Jessica said, her voice calm. She traced a line on the monitor screen. Here, the aggregate is mixed with river stone. It's weaker. We hit here. The squad looked to Voss. He was the senior technician. He looked from the screen to Jessica's determined face. He nodded. Set the bag, millimeter increments. The operation was a ballet of precision under a sword of Damocles. The airbag was snaked down the chase and carefully positioned. Jessica called the pressure increments from above, her eyes glued to the camera feed. 50 psi stop, 75. Hold. On the screen, the dust around the slab's edge began to stir. At 110 psi, a sharp asterisk crack echoed faintly up the chase. A fracture line appeared exactly where Jessica had predicted. Now came the spreader. It was a tool more commonly used to pry car doors. Inserted into the new crack, its slow, powerful jaws began to open. The slab groaned. In the command post, Chief Thorne watched the feed, his knuckles white. The audio picked up Liam's faint moan of pain as the pressure on his leg released. Leg is free, Voss called out, but he's non-responsive. Shock is setting in. Get the basket down, Jessica ordered. We're doing a vertical lift, no horizontal movement. He can't take any jostling. But as the rescue basket was being lowered, a new voice crackled over the command channel. It was from the planning section. Command, be advised. We've pulled the original building blueprints from the city archive. There's a discrepancy. Thorne keyed his mic. What discrepancy? The north face conduit chase. According to the 1978 retrofit plans, it was filled with concrete in 2005 for seismic reinforcement. That chase should be solid. The information hit like a physical blow. The chase they were currently using as their lifeline was supposed to be non-existent. Jessica's theory was built on a ghost. Voss looked up from the monitor, his face pale. Jessica, did you hear that? She didn't look away from the operation. I heard. The blueprint says it's filled. The blueprint is wrong, she said with absolute certainty. The draft I felt, the space on the camera, the building doesn't lie, the paperwork does. But why? Why would the record be wrong? It was then that Jessica's own memory provided a terrible piece of the puzzle. The forgotten manual on the bleacher. The visiting army medic. The exercise wasn't just about medical extraction. It was held at a decommissioned industrial site owned by the Department of Defense. A site used to train for urban operations. A site that might have its blueprints altered for security reasons. The old Adams Street Mill had been purchased by a private holding company 6 years ago. A company with no other assets. A shell. Don't stop, Jessica commanded, pushing the thought aside. The building is what it is. Get him out. The basket reached Liam. With immense care, the team below secured him. The vertical lift began. Every inch was agony. The chase was tight. Debris rained down. Then, halfway up, the camera feed shuddered. A low, grinding rumble vibrated through the bricks. The north wall is shifting, a spotter yelled. It's leaning. The micro-breach had altered the delicate balance. The entire rescue corridor was on the verge of collapsing. They had seconds. Full winch now, Jessica screamed. The winch operator poured on the power. The basket shot upward. Just as Liam's form cleared the top of the chase, the north face of the rubble pile let out a deep, sorrowful groan and slumped inward, filling the shaft with tons of brick and mortar in a rolling cloud of dust. The basket slammed onto the ground beside the pile. Medical teams swarmed. Liam Miller was alive, unconscious, his leg badly injured, but his pulse was strong. He was loaded into a waiting ambulance and sped away. The rescue squad stood in the settling dust, coughing, stunned. They had done it. Against all odds and protocol, they had pulled a living victim from a tomb. But Jessica didn't celebrate. She was staring at the now solid north face, her mind racing. The blueprint was wrong, deliberately wrong. and she had just used a classified military procedure to navigate a building that officially didn't have the architecture to support it. Battalion Chief Thorne approached her. The anger was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out awe and a dawning suspicion. "You saved my son's life," he said, his voice rough. Jessica just nodded, her eyes distant. "That knowledge," Thorne pressed, "that wasn't from a community college paramedic program. Who trained you?" Before she could answer, a black sedan with government plates pulled through the outer cordon, ignoring the police lines. Two men in dark suits got out. They walked with purpose, not toward the command post, but straight toward Jessica. They didn't look like city officials. They looked like auditors of chaos. The lead man stopped in front of her, his eyes cold and appraising. He didn't ask for her name, he said it. "Paramedic Jessica Klein, we need you to come with us, immediately." Voss stepped forward. On what authority? She just led a successful rescue. The man didn't even glance at him. He kept his eyes locked on Jessica. "The authority of the original building owner, the Department of Defense, and we have questions about your familiarity with a restricted tactical doctrine used at a secured training facility you have no record of ever visiting." Jessica didn't move. The dust from the collapse still coated her uniform, the adrenaline of the rescue still sharp in her veins. These men looked like they'd been waiting in the dark for this exact moment. Battalion Chief Thorne stepped between them, his authority returning in a protective surge. "She's not going anywhere. She's under my command for this incident. You want to talk, you go through me, and you show me credentials that outrank a city emergency declaration." The lead agent, a man with cold eyes and a voice that held no inflection, finally glanced at Thorne. He pulled a badge from his inner coat pocket. It wasn't FBI or DHS, it was from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. "This supersedes your municipal authority, Chief. This involves a breach of national security protocols." "By a paramedic," Thorne said, incredulous. "By knowledge that is compartmentalized and restricted to Tier 1 Special Operations personnel," the agent replied. His gaze swung back to Jessica. "Knowledge that you, Paramedic Klein, have no possible avenue to possess, unless you obtained it illegally." The surrounding firefighters and rescue techs stirred, a low murmur of disbelief and anger. Carl Voss, the combat engineer, spoke up. "She used it to save a life. What does it matter where she learned it?" "It matters," the second agent said, speaking for the first time, "because the TSEP manual is a controlled document. Its dissemination is a felony. Its application by unauthorized personnel in a civilian environment constitutes a reckless endangerment of a federal asset, that building." Jessica found her voice. It was calmer than she felt. That building was a death trap with incorrect blueprints. It almost killed a fire chief's son. What asset? The lead agent ignored her question. "You will come with us, now, or we will place you under federal arrest for espionage violations." A standoff crystallized in the flashing lights. Thorne was calculating, his loyalty to his savior warring with a lifetime of respecting the chain of command, even one he couldn't see. Jessica saw the conflict. She also saw the futility. "It's okay, Chief," she said quietly. "I'll go." "Jessica," Voss started. "They have the questions," she said, cutting him off. "Maybe I have some of my own." She walked toward the black sedan, the agents flanking her. As she passed Thorne, she paused. "Check on Liam, and have someone pull the property records for the holding company that owned this mill. Look for a parent corporation called Janus Holdings." She said it just loud enough for him to hear. The chief's eyes narrowed in recognition. Janus Holdings was a name that had appeared, and then quickly disappeared, from a controversial city council deal for a new communications tower years ago. A deal that had military advisory notes attached to it. The ride to the federal building was silent. They didn't handcuff her. They didn't speak. They brought her to a stark, windowless interview room that felt more clinical than threatening. The lead agent, who introduced himself as Agent Greer, sat across from her. The other remained standing by the door. "Let's start with the simple version," Greer said, placing a digital recorder on the table but not activating it. This was off the record. "Where did you see the tactical casualty extraction protocol?" Jessica had rehearsed this lie for 2 years in her head, never expecting to use it. "Online, a forum for military medicine enthusiasts. Someone posted excerpts." Greer smiled, a thin, humorless stretch of lips. "The TSEP manual has never been digitized. It is printed on non-scannable paper with chemical tracers. Any attempt to photograph or photocopy it degrades the text. It exists in 312 physical copies, all serialized, all accounted for in a locked vault at Fort Bragg. Try again." The specificity stunned her. Her rehearsed lie was dead on arrival. She stayed silent. "Your father," Greer continued, as if reading from a file. "Captain Michael Klein, Army Rangers, killed in action in Kunar Province, Afghanistan in 2011. You were 15. Jessica's breath caught. "What does my father have to do with this?" "Everything," Greer said. "After his death, you were granted a legacy tour of several stateside bases as part of a family outreach program. One of those tours, in the summer of 2012, was to the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Polk, Louisiana, where, coincidentally, a field testing unit for the then-new TSEP was conducting exercises." A memory, hazy and warm with grief, surfaced. A bored teenager trailing a cheerful public affairs officer. A hangar where soldiers were practicing carrying wounded through obstacle courses. A table with pamphlets. One of the soldiers, a medic with a kind face, seeing her lingering. He'd handed her a thick, plain-covered booklet. "Here, kid, boredom cure. It's like a puzzle book. But don't lose it, okay? Just give it back before you leave." She sat in a corner, fascinated by the diagrams of knots and load forces, forgetting about it until the PAO rushed her to the next stop. She never returned it. She'd shoved it in her backpack, a secret souvenir of a world she'd lost. "I forgot to give it back," she whispered, the admission feeling both trivial and monumental. "You stole a classified document," Greer corrected, his voice hardening. "A document that, according to our audit, went missing that same day. A security incident that was quietly buried to avoid embarrassment. That manual in the wrong hands could compromise operational tactics. It did more than that. It led you to a building that was part of a dormant surveillance network." Jessica's head was spinning. Surveillance network. "The Adams Street Mill," the second agent by the door said. "Purchased by a duty front company in 2016. Structurally reinforced with certain modifications. Conduit chases lined with fiber-optic-capable tubing. Substructure pockets designed to house autonomous sensor packages. It was a sleeper site. A piece of urban infrastructure that could be activated to monitor the city in the event of a catastrophic threat. The blueprints on file with the city were sanitized. The real schematics are top secret." The realization was a cold wave. She hadn't outsmarted a random collapse. She had navigated a secret government architecture. Her triumph was now a security breach. "The collapse was an accident," Greer said, leaning forward. "A stupid, mundane plumbing leak. But your response was not an accident. You applied restricted knowledge to penetrate a secured site. We need to know what else you saw in that manual. And we need to know if you've shared it." "I saved a life," Jessica said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "That's all I did. I never told anyone. I didn't even understand what it was until tonight." Greer studied her for a long moment. Then he slid a photograph across the table. It was a grainy still from what looked like a body camera feed. It showed a younger Jessica, maybe 18, at a shooting range. She was holding a rifle, her posture expert, her gaze focused downrange. "You're a proficient marksman, Jessica, taught by your father before he died. You scored in the 99th percentile on your paramedic entrance exams, particularly the sections on trauma triage under stress. Your psych eval notes a pronounced aptitude for tactical problem-solving and a discomfort with institutional hierarchy. He tapped the photo. The girl who stole the manual grew into a woman who used it perfectly on her first try. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. "What are you saying?" Jessica asked, a dread building in her chest. "I'm saying," Greer replied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial low, "that perhaps you didn't find that manual by accident. Perhaps it found you. Your father's unit in Cunnar, they weren't just rangers. They were part of a test group for early TSEP integration. He would have been familiar with the concepts. Maybe he even knew the medic who lost the manual you took." The room seemed to shrink. The narrative of her life, the grieving daughter, the overachiever trying to honor her father's memory, was being rewritten as something darker, something orchestrated. "You think I was groomed for this?" "We think you are a latent asset," Greer said. "A person with trained, embedded skills who exists outside the official system. Someone who could be useful, or someone who could be a tremendous liability. Tonight, you demonstrated both." He stood up. "The choice is now yours, Jessica. We can pursue the felony charges, the theft of classified material, the breach of a secured site. You will never practice medicine again. You will spend a decade in prison." "Or," she asked, the word barely audible, "or you come in from the cold, you submit to a full debrief. You help us understand the full extent of the knowledge you possess, and in return, we make the incident tonight disappear. You go back to your life, a life with a new, permanent footnote in your file." It was an offer that was not an offer. It was a threat with a disguise, compliance or destruction. Before she could answer, the door opened. A woman in an Army Class A uniform stood there, a colonel's eagle on her collar. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an air of absolute authority. Agent Greer immediately straightened. "Ma'am, we were just—" "I know what you were just doing, Greer," the colonel said, her voice calm but leaving no room for argument. "Leave us." After a moment's hesitation, Greer and the other agent filed out. The colonel closed the door and took his seat. She didn't look at Jessica like a problem. She looked at her like a specimen under a microscope. "My name is Colonel Valerie Shaw," she said. "I run the Prodigy program. You've just met our internal security, whose job is to plug leaks. My job is to find the leaks that are actually springs, new sources of water." "I don't understand," Jessica said. "The manual you took," Shaw said. "The one my overzealous colleague just threatened you over. It was a beta version, flawed, the pressure brake technique you used tonight. In the beta manual, it has a 30% failure rate. It crushes the casualty more often than it saves them. The technique you described to your team was different, more refined. You adjusted the angle of fracture based on the aggregate mixture you saw on camera. That's not in the manual. That's intuition built on deep understanding." "Where did you learn that, Jessica?" Jessica was utterly lost. I don't know, it just made sense. The stone in the concrete would be a weaker path." Colonel Shaw leaned back, a faint, satisfied smile on her face. "Exactly. You improved it, in real time under extreme duress. Do you know what we call that in my program? Talent. The kind that can't be taught, the kind your father had." She opened a folder she'd brought in, sliding a different photograph toward Jessica. It showed her father, younger, laughing with another soldier. Behind them was a chalkboard covered in complex diagrams of structural load forces. "Your father wasn't just a soldier. He was an engineer, a visionary. He contributed to the early principles of the TSEP. He believed the best medics were also improvisational engineers. The program was shelved after his death. Bureaucracy. But I never stopped looking for individuals who inherited that particular cognitive architecture." The pieces were crashing together, forming a picture that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Her entire path, her interests, her skills, her career, was it hers? Or was it a path laid down by her father's legacy and spotted by people like Shaw? "Why are you telling me this?" Jessica asked. "Because Greer is wrong," Shaw said. You're not a liability, you're a validation. And I'm not offering you a deal to avoid prison. I'm offering you a job, a real one. Come work for the Prodigy program. Help us rewrite the manuals. Train the next generation. Use that mind of yours for its intended purpose. It was the opposite of everything she'd just been threatened with. Honor instead of handcuffs. Purpose instead of punishment. But it came from the same shadowy world. "And if I say no?" Jessica asked. Shaw's smile didn't fade, but it cooled. "Then Greer's version of events becomes the official one, and you will be neutralized. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're a living reminder of a program that failed to recognize its own potential. We can't have that." The choice was now stark and infinitely more complex. Prison and ruin, or a gilded cage within the very machine that had just threatened to crush her. As she sat there, the image of Liam Miller being loaded into the ambulance flashed in her mind. She had saved a life, but to continue saving lives, she might have to surrender her own. Jessica sat in the sterile silence, the weight of Colonel Shaw's offer pressing down like the rubble she'd just escaped. Two doors. One led to a cage of her own making. The other led to a different kind of cage, built of secrets and her father's ghost. She looked at the photograph of her father by the chalkboard. The laugh on his face was genuine. The diagrams behind him were not of war but of preservation, how to hold things up, how to create space where none existed. That was the man she remembered, not a weapon, a protector. "I need time," Jessica said, her voice firm. "You don't have it," Colonel Shaw replied. "The incident report is being drafted as we speak. In 12 hours, it becomes immutable." "Then give me 11, Jessica countered. "I need to see the consequences of my choice. I need to see Liam Miller." Shaw considered her, then gave a single, slow nod. "Very well, under escort. But understand, Jessica, this is not a negotiation. It is an alignment. You will choose us, because the person you are has no other home." An unmarked car took her back to the hospital. Agent Greer, a silent, displeased shadow in the front seat. The sunrise was bleeding across the city, turning the glass of the hospital windows gold. It felt like a lifetime since she'd stood in the dust at the collapse site. Battalion Chief Thorne was waiting in the ICU family lounge. He looked older, the lines on his face carved deep by the night. When he saw her, he stood immediately. "They let you go?" he asked, his eyes darting to Greer. "For now," Jessica said. "How is he?" "Out of surgery. They saved the leg. He's stable, sleeping." Thorne's voice caught. "The doctors said the precision of the extraction, it kept the trauma manageable. He wouldn't have survived a conventional dig. You saved him twice." He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of profound gratitude that transcended rank. "What did they want from you?" "My future," Jessica said simply. She looked past him through the window into Liam's room. The young man was asleep, machines monitoring his steady vitals. His father's relief was a tangible force in the room. This was what mattered, not protocols, not security classifications. "This." "The holding company," Thorne said quietly, stepping closer. "Janus Holdings. I made a call. It's a dead end. But the city inspector who signed off on the false blueprints for the mill retrofit in 2005. He took a consulting job with a defense contractor 6 months later and retired to Costa Rica a year after that. He died in a boating accident in 2008. No witnesses." The information was a cold stone in Jessica's gut. It confirmed everything Shaw and Greer had implied. The building was a secret, and secrets were protected permanently. "Don't dig, Chief," Jessica warned softly. "Knowing is dangerous." Thorne's eyes hardened. "They threatened you, didn't they?" "They gave me a choice, serve them or serve time." The fire chief, a man who lived by codes of loyalty and service, looked genuinely pained. "There has to be another way. The union, the media." "And tell them what?" Jessica asked. "That I used a stolen military manual to break into a secret government building. I'd be buried in lawsuits before I finished the sentence. And Liam's rescue, it would be investigated, picked apart, turned into a scandal. He doesn't deserve that. You don't deserve that. She was protecting them. She saw the realization dawn on Thorne's face, followed by helpless anger. He was used to saving people. He couldn't save her from this. "What will you do?" he asked. Before she could answer, a nurse came out of Liam's room. "He's awake. He's asking for the paramedic, the one with the blonde ponytail." Greer shifted, a clear signal to say no. Jessica ignored him. She walked into the room. Liam Miller looked pale and exhausted, but his eyes were clear. He managed a weak smile as she approached. "They told me you called the shot," he said, his voice raspy. "The pressure break. I remember the sound, the crack. Then the weight was gone." "You remember that?" Jessica asked, surprised. "I remember everything," he said. "The dark, the dust, thinking I was dead, then hearing a voice from above, a woman's voice, calm, certain, giving orders about shear lines and aggregate." He studied her. "You knew exactly what to do, like you'd done it 100 times. "I hadn't," Jessica said. "Not once." "Then how?" It was the question at the heart of everything. She gave him the only true answer she had left. "I understood the problem. The building was a puzzle. You were the piece that needed to come out." Liam held her gaze. "My dad said the feds took you because of what you knew." "Yes. And I'm deciding what comes next." Liam nodded slowly, wincing at the pain. "My senior thesis was on ethical engineering, how buildings serve people, not the other way around." He took a shallow breath. "That mill, I felt the space before it fell. The ceiling was wrong. The proportions in the basement didn't match the plans. I was trying to document it when..." He trailed off. "It wasn't right. It was built to be something else. You saw that, didn't you?" "I did," Jessica whispered. "Don't let them bury you with it," Liam said, his voice gaining strength. "Use it." His words echoed his father, but from a different direction. Not an order, a plea, a witness affirming that her gift had a purpose outside of shadows. She left the room with a different kind of weight, not the burden of a choice, but the clarity of one. In the hallway, she faced Colonel Shaw, who had arrived silently. Greer stood beside her, a statue of disapproval. "Well," Shaw asked. "I have conditions," Jessica said. Shaw's eyebrow raised. "You're not in a position to set conditions." "I am the position," Jessica stated. "You want the talent. You want the validation of my father's work. That requires my willing participation, not my coerced compliance." "Name them." "1. I remain a paramedic. I work my shifts at the city EMS, that is my cover and my grounding. 2. I consult for your Prodigy program on a case-by-case basis. Training, manual review, problem solving, no field operations, no weapons. 3. The incident at the Adams Street Mill is officially recorded as a standard USAR success. No mention of me. No mention of TSEP. Liam Miller gets to be a survivor, not a security incident. 4. My record is cleared, and no further action is taken against me for the manual. It gets listed as archival training material provided to me through approved channels." She held her breath. It was a daring gambit to dictate terms to a powerful, secretive program. Colonel Shaw was silent for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across her face. It was different from before. It held a spark of respect. "You want to have your cake and eat it too. Stay in the light while dipping a toe in our world." "I want to save lives," Jessica corrected. "In the ambulance, and by making sure the people who do what you do are better at it. That's the alignment." Shaw looked at Greer, then back to Jessica. "The answer is yes, on one additional condition of my own. You submit to a quarterly review, and the first time your consulting fails to meet our standards or your civilian life creates a conflict, the deal is void, and we revert to Agent Greer's original disposition." It was a trapdoor, a permanent sword over her head, but it was also a path forward. "Agreed," Jessica said. The paperwork was signed not with a flourish, but with the quiet click of a pen in a secure briefing room an hour later. It wasn't a triumphant contract. It was a treaty, a ceasefire between her past and her future. A week later, Jessica was back on Ambulance 47. The collapse was city news for a day, then faded, remembered only as a miraculous rescue. Battalion Chief Thorne received a commendation. Carl Voss got a promotion. Life moved on. But once a month, Jessica drove to a nondescript office park outside the city. Inside, in a secure classroom, she faced a group of Syria-side soldiers and special operations medics. She taught them about load dynamics, about seeing buildings as living, breathing systems that could be negotiated with. She used the Adams Street Mill, anonymized, as her primary case study. She saw her father's work in their manuals. She improved it. She made it clearer, safer, more intuitive. Colonel Shaw watched from the back of the room, her satisfaction evident. One afternoon after a session, Shaw handed Jessica a sealed envelope. "This was in your father's personal effects. It was never passed to you. I intercepted it. I thought you should have it now." Alone in her car, Jessica opened it. It was a letter in her father's familiar, rushed handwriting. "Jess, if you're reading this, I'm not there to explain, and I'm sorry for that. I work on puzzles most people don't see, how to keep good people alive in bad places. I see that same puzzle-solving look in your eyes when you concentrate. It's a gift. Don't let anyone tell you it's not. Use it to build, to protect, to save. The world needs more builders, sweetheart, be that. Whatever you do, be that." She sat there for a long time, the letter in her hands, the final piece settling into place. Her choice hadn't been a betrayal. It had been an acceptance. She wasn't a weapon. She wasn't a rogue asset. She was a builder, and she had just begun. As she started the engine to head back to the city, back to her next shift, her next call, the radio crackled with a dispatcher's calm voice. A multi-vehicle accident on the interstate. Multiple casualties. Her world. Her choice. She flipped on the lights and sirens and moved toward the chaos, ready to solve the next puzzle. The story of Jessica Klein never made the news. There was no press conference, no medal ceremony, no headline about the rookie who broke the rules and saved a life with a secret code. In the official record, the Adams Street Mill collapse was just another successful urban search and rescue operation, a testament to training and teamwork. The deeper truth of classified manuals, altered blueprints, and a latent talent awakened under pressure remains filed away in a secure server, known only to a handful of people. But that doesn't mean nothing changed. Liam Miller recovered. He walks without a limp. He's an advocate for building safety reform, though he never mentions the strange proportions of that basement. Battalion Chief Thorne looks at his rookie firefighters a little differently now, wondering what unseen potential might be hiding behind a fresh face. Carl Voss, the combat engineer, sometimes uses the term sheer line when training new rescue techs, and when they ask where it's from, he just smiles and says, "Good instinct." And Jessica, she still works her shifts. She still rides Ambulance 47. To her patients, she's just a capable, calm paramedic. They have no idea that once a month, she helps rewrite the manuals that will guide special operations medics in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. She lives in the tension between two worlds, a builder of bridges in the light and a solver of puzzles in the shadows. Her father's letter stays in her pocket, a quiet compass. She proved him right. The gift was real, and she chose, against all pressure, to use it to build and to protect, not as a weapon, but as a tool for preservation. This is the reality of many who stand at that crossroads. The world is full of secret codes, not just classified phrases, but unique skills, unconventional wisdom, and perspectives that don't fit in the standard manual. They reside in people the system often overlooks. The rookie, the outsider, the quiet one in the back of the room. The true test isn't just having that knowledge. It's having the courage to step forward when the established protocols have failed, to speak up when everyone in authority says you're wrong, to believe that your unique understanding of a problem might be the only key to its solution. Jessica's story asks us a simple, haunting question. How many other secret codes are walking around unnoticed? How many potential solutions are being dismissed because they come from an unexpected source? The next time you see someone who doesn't look the part, who doesn't have the rank or the title or the years of experience, remember the rookie paramedic who saw a building not as rubble, but as a puzzle. And remember that sometimes, the person who saves the day is the one you were trained to ignore. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of the unseen and the uncredited, then do something simple. Hit subscribe. By joining this community, you're telling the algorithm that these are the kinds of stories that matter. Stories of quiet courage, of hidden knowledge, and of the moment when someone decides to use their gift, not for glory but for good. Your subscription ensures these narratives don't get buried. Thanks for watching.